Okay, we are now live with a new episode of Prehistory, A Traveler's Guide. I am your host, Greg Nunneman, and with me today on the panel today are Sam Myler, Chris Grohl, and in celebration of Kong Skull Island and all things Godzilla, we are having on for you a very special guest, acclaimed comic book artist and Godzilla aficionado, Matt Frank. Welcome to our show.
Hi, guys.
You want your car back in the
Me.
garage?
Yes.
Why didn't you
I'm
do it?
happy to be here. We've been, Greg and I have been talking about this for a while, so I'm excited to finally pull the trigger on it. So thanks for having me.
Oh, it's been my greatest of honors to have you on, Matt. And well, as I always with a guest, how about you give a little background on yourself for our audience?
Well, I am primarily known as a artist for the Godzilla comic book series. From IDW Publishing for the most part, and I worked with them for 6 years on from 2010 all the way to 2016 on various Godzilla comics, including Godzilla Rulers of Earth was the big one. I also did work on Godzilla Legends and Godzilla Rage Across Time, and also did a lot of covers for Kingdom of Monsters and History's Greatest Monster. In addition to that, I worked on a couple of Transformers books and some Mars Attack stuff. I've been recently doing a little bit of Power Rangers stuff as well. Pretty much, if I'm a fan of something, I'm going to try to get my hands in it in some capacity. So, yeah, aside from that, I just... I'm just a really big Kaiju fan, and I really just like doing Kaiju stuff. And I also, of course, really like dinosaurs, and prehistory, which is another thing I'm happy about being on this show about. So yeah, I don't know. I think I covered my bases.
All right, and I'll let Sam ask his round of questions here before I run them down in chronological order.
When did your love of Godzilla, King Kong, and other giant monsters begin?
Really, I think it's the same for a lot of us, where we start as kids, and we like dinosaurs. And dinosaurs sort of are this gateway drug to everything else, because as a kid, dinosaurs they're these larger-than-life, real-life monsters, and you go and you learn about them in school. They're the only monsters that are taught by school mandate, and that I know of, and it's fun to memorize their names, and it's fun to go to see them in the museums and stuff. So then I eventually found out about Godzilla and how he was like this giant dinosaur that would destroy cities and stuff. And I was like, that's cool. So I got involved in that, and that's, of course, opens up all these new windows where you can start learning about, because they're all from Japan, so you start learning about Japanese culture, and you start getting into that aspect of it. And on the other side of the coin, you read dinosaur magazines and dinosaur books, and you find out about stuff like King Kong, which is, this movie about a giant ape that fights dinosaurs, and you go watch that. I remember watching the original King Kong as a kid, and I really enjoyed. Actually, the first version I ever saw was the colorized version with a big golden T-Rex and the kind of bluish gray Kong. It was really interesting. But yeah, that was cool. So yeah, it's really kind of where it sprung from, was with my love of dinosaurs as a kid, and it all just kind of spiraled out from there.
That's pretty much how it got started with me.
Same here with myself.
Yep. Right on. I like it.
Next question is, how long have you been in this business?
This business is a cruel mistress. I've been professionally working in comics technically since, I want to say, 2005. Right around 2005 is when I started actually getting professional work. But as it is for a lot of artists, it's not really quote unquote work. It's it's low level stuff. There's a few artists who will they'll hit big, like guys like Joe Madureira and stuff, who will just explode onto the scene and become these overnight sensations. Whereas with me, I started just having my little DeviantArt page, just posting stuff, and just posting fan art, and just of stuff that I liked. And at the time, what I didn't really put together until sometime later, one of the reasons why I started getting a lot of hits was because I was one of the only people doing consistent Godzilla stuff and consistent Kaiju stuff. Because at the time, around about after 2004, Godzilla was kind of a dead commodity. There wasn't really anybody producing anything new. I mean, they were making the video games, but after Destroy All Monsters Melee, they weren't being super well received by people outside of the fan base. So as a result, I was like, and then the King Kong 2005 movie stoked a lot of fires for me creatively, and I started posting a lot of stuff, and then that's how I started getting actual work. I was initially approached by Darren Davis of Blue Water Productions to produce artwork for their upcoming Ray Harryhausen comic book tie-ins, and that was a pretty neat little experience, because it was kind of this crash course in how not to manage your schedule, and because I had never produced full comics before that point, and I was very slow at it. But I learned a lot and made a lot of lifetime contacts and stuff. And then towards the end of college, I managed to get in with IDW doing a little bit of Transformers stuff, specifically stuff like Beast Wars, because that was what I grew up on, and I remember basically knocking out the door trying to do Beast Wars stuff. And then I maintained contact with them over the years, and that sort of eventually led to doing Godzilla.
Very interesting.
Insane. Go ahead.
Sorry, was there somebody else about to ask something?
I don't believe so. All right, you can move on to your next question, Sam.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Yeah, pardon me, my mistake.
Right.
What are your personal favorite Kaiju monsters and Kaiju films?
Oh boy, you're killing me, Smalls. Let me think for a second. So, it's really hard for me to pick specific favorite Kaiju, because they're like kind of like your children. I just love all of them. I'm actually turning around and looking at my shelf right now. Aside from Godzilla himself, I've always had a soft spot for Varan the Unbelievable, who's this really, I'm sure the chat here knows about them, but for those who maybe don't know, Varan was this sort of drop in the hat, one and done monster from the 60s that was produced mainly for television. And it's this lizard creature with the ability to fly like a flying squirrel. And it's honestly not much more to him than that. But for some reason, that design really appeals to me a lot. It's a very elegant design and a very creative design. And there's just a lot of stories associated with that production. And the original suit maker actually has one of my comics. Somebody gave it to him in Japan recently.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a couple other monsters I really like. I could go on and on. See, here's the thing. I could talk about every single monster and something I like about them. There's not many monsters I actively dislike. Again, I'm just looking at my shelf right now, and I even like the 1998 Godzilla's design a lot. I have a couple of figures of that character. I love the classics, and I love I love the newer monsters, and I have 3 shelves of Ultraman monsters, because Ultraman monsters, Ultra Kaiju, tend to be very weird and cool, and they're just rapid-fire ideas. Although now that I'm looking at my shelf, a lot of them are just bipedal dinosaur monsters, and that makes me disgusted with myself. But then again, that's a popular archetype for kaiju, and for good reason. But as for specific films, as far as Godzilla goes, my favorite is probably GMK, Giant Monsters All Out Attack from 2001. That is probably my number one favorite Godzilla movie, just because it's such a refined, ambitious film when compared to a lot of the other films coming out at the time. I mean, I like all the Godzilla movies, but the Heisei Millennium films are a lot of really ambitious ideas that sort of don't quite stick the landing all the time. But that's neither here nor there. But GMK is just a very ambitious and well done film. And next to that, I would have to say some of my other favorites are like the original Mothra vs. Godzilla, the original King Kong vs. Godzilla, which is actually like nobody in the States knows what an amazing satire of a film that is. It's an incredibly satirical, very funny film. In Japanese. The American version, they tried to water that down a little bit and make it a little more serious, and as a result, they kind of made it boring. Whereas the Japanese version is like, it's almost like a Mel Brooks comedy. I mean, it's so over the top. It doesn't go as far as Blazing Saddles, but I would say maybe something along the lines of Young Frankenstein, like where it still kind of operates in its own universe. Really, really good. Aside from Godzilla, the Gamera trilogy from the 90s I actually rank as the 3 greatest monster movies of all time. That might be a little hyperbolic for me to say, but I definitely think they are goddamn fantastic. I don't know if we can curse on here. Can we curse on here?
I'm gonna let it slide this time.
Okay, I'll keep it PG. And you know, there's just a lot of other kaiju movies. I will say, and I'm sure we'll get to this. I'm really thinking really hard about the ranking of Colossal in my personal estimation for like one of my favorite kaiju movies of all time. Because I saw that recently, and I was just absolutely floored by it. So that ranks pretty high too. But yeah, that's what I got for now.
Okay. Next question. Were there any artists that were inspirational for you?
Oh, man. Yeah, definitely. Big inspiration on me as a kid was Ricardo Delgado and the books Age of Reptiles.
Great
they're
comics.
Fantastic graphic novel. Really, really excellent. And if you look at the way Delgado draws his dinosaurs, you can really you'll see where my inspiration comes from, because he manages to draw so much emotionality out of these non-human creatures, and that really inspired me as a kid. Because I remember, did those books come out before Jurassic Park? I don't remember. I feel like they did.
I think I could be wrong, but I think they came out sometime, maybe a little after Jurassic Park, I think.
I just remember reading these books and thinking, I didn't know dinosaurs could be like this. I didn't know they could be this vicious, but also this, like, I didn't know they could be characters like this, you know? Because as a kid, you grow up with dinosaurs basically just being movie monsters, and then, you know, which I love. You know, I love stuff like 1 Million Years BC, and of course, Jurassic Park is actually one of my favorite films of all time. But something about Delgado's work was just absolutely spectacular, and really kind of touched a nerve. Beyond that, guys like Bill Stout. Hang on a second. Guys like Bill Stout and Art Adams, of course. In fact, I recently got into a political argument with someone on my Facebook page, and he tried to insult me by calling me like a second-rate Art Adams or a poor man's Art Adams. I can't really remember exactly, but I took that as a point of pride. And now whenever, because Art has done a couple of covers for some of the books I've worked on. So whenever I sign his covers, I always write Matt Frank, the poor man's Art Adams, next to it. And I got to meet Art last year. Really sweet guy. He actually knew me. He knew my work, and he's very complimentary. So that was a big moment for me. What do you think? Well, like I said, Bill Stout's really great. I see him at Dragon Con every year. Just a really nice guy. Very. I can tell that his brain is always working. You know, he's always kind of a mile away, but not in a bad way. Like in a oh man, I feel like I'm wasting this guy's time because he's clearly like operating on this whole other level. I mean, I could go on all day about artists that I love. Obviously, my sensei, Shinji Nishikawa, the Godzilla, one of the #1 Godzilla artists in Japan, is a big inspiration and just a tremendous guy to meet. Let me think about somebody I haven't met. No, Dan Burton, I know him. That's the thing, like, when you become a professional and you start doing this stuff, like, round the clock, and you start traveling for it, and meeting people, that's when you get to kind of meet your heroes. And they do say never meet your heroes. I don't really agree with that, because at least maybe when you're an artist, because artists all tend to be on a relatively similar wavelength. So meeting your heroes. I mean, I'm pretty good friends with Bob Eggelton. You know, the book cover painter and just amazing acrylic painter. And Bob is just really, he calls me the son he never had, and we have a really great relationship. He's just a great guy. So yeah, I mean, and there's, like I said, there's probably about 15 other Japanese artists I could talk about, but I'll leave it at that.
I think it's a pretty good list of people, Matt, to be quite frank.
Thing.
And Mr. Eggleston's up on Bob Eggelton. That guy's been one of my favorite artists growing up personally, not just as a Godzilla artist, but just overall as an artist, period. I consider him one of my top 5, top 10 favorite artists, period.
He actually recently asked me to write a letter of recommendation for an award that he's up for, and I just couldn't be more flattered. And I basically just gushed about him for like 3 or 4 paragraphs, talking about how, like all artists, we all kind of get down on ourselves. Sometimes we question our abilities, and or we, because we're artists, we're emotional little snowflakes, and he's no stranger to that. And then I'll be talking to him, and I just want to smack him in the face and scream, "You're Bob blanking Eggelton. You need to ride that," because like, men want to be you, women want to be with you, like that sort of thing, you know. So anyway, yeah.
I mean, even before I knew of your work, Matt, Bob was one of the first Godzilla artists I actually knew of by name, along with Art Adams, growing up while reading the Random House Godzilla books and the Godzilla Compendium that was published by J.D. Lees back in the 90s.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty sure you and I are pretty close in age, because that's definitely all stuff I grew up with. I grew up with, when it came to Bob, I grew up with his stuff on the Dark Horse Godzilla comics. And those covers, of course, spiraling out from Art Adams' covers, and now both of them have done covers for my comics, which makes me turn into a big gooey puddle of nonsense. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, just a couple years ago at Dynafest, I got to meet someone you probably might have been also inspired by, Mark Schultz, who did the Xenozoic Tales comics.
Oh, I would love to meet Mark. That would be so cool. He's I love the way, I love how much gravity and, I love how his characters just feel like they have weight to them, and they feel like they've got that classic pulp adventure quality to them where they just feel like they would come right off the page. I mean, they're freaking fantastic.
I mean, his dinosaur artwork is some of the best I've seen. He actually is close friends with the curator of vertebrate paleontology at the Cleveland Museum, Dr. Michael Ryan. So that's also another bonus for me personally.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, I really need to try to track him down at some point and hopefully get to meet up with them. I also need to get out to one of these proper dinosaur conventions because I hear about these things and I'm just like, why am I not there?
Well, there's one in Cleveland called DinoFest every second weekend of November.
Second weekend of November. I will make a note of that.
I'll give you the heads up when it gets announced because there's a great lineup of paleontologists and at least one paleo artist speaker per year.
Cool.
And we had a really super good lineup last year. Sam also got to attend it with me.
Excellent. That's awesome.
Well, that actually brings me to my next question. What are your views on Dinosaurs Attack, the trading cards, the comic books, and the unmade movie?
Oh, Dinosaurs Attack. I think I was briefly up to actually be involved on that small revival they had, and but then my main contact with Topps left the company, and then I think that kind of fell through, and they went with other artists. I mean, granted, they went with painters for the most part. They went with painting illustrators, which I'm not really a painter. I'm a graphic artist, comic artist. So I can understand that, and I would want them to be able to try to capture that original look, but I can't help but feeling a little bit grumbly because I just love the audacity of that universe. I'm personally not. I'm a little bit of a weenie in the fact that in the respect of me just I'm not really a violence nut. I don't like they're honestly a little too violent for me, for my personal taste, and I'm just like, because it's just kind of indulgent, and but some of it comes back around to being funny, where it's just like, it's just kind of ridiculous, and I wind up liking it a lot, but at the same time, and the idea of dinosaurs like being like spilling out into modern day, although that was the thing, is like, I also have to cock my eyebrow when I see like a triceratops like eating somebody or whatever, and I'm like, okay, like, I mean, there's no question that herbivorous dinosaurs were probably still pretty violent, considering that, you know, how many people are killed by water buffalo and hippos every year. But yeah, I mean, even though I get a little squidged out by the violence element, I still like them. I still like the audacity of it is kind of fun for me. So yeah, I like them. I like them a lot.
Yeah, same here. I mean, they combine the classic, style of dinosaurs from like Willis O'Brien, Ray Harryhausen, and just amp up the violence and gore factor to absurd levels that just makes it quite entertaining, to say the least.
I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it, but and no spoilers, but Skull Island's level of violence, I think, was right about pitch perfect for me, because it was just violent enough to be for me to be like, oh my god, I'm not used to my dinosaurs and monsters being this violent. But yeah, no, I like it.
Yeah, the comics go on and push the rating of how far PG-13 could really go for it would be slapped with an R rating in terms of, death and violence.
Yeah, I didn't get too bad, but
it's not Logan level. It's not Logan levels of blood and gore, just for reference.
Well, yeah. Hold on a second. Sorry. Okay, I got it. Sorry, I set my alarm to go off when I needed to get on the chat with you guys. Alrighty, so.
Alright, now my last question for the time being is, do you hope for a Godzilla vs. Gamera movie?
I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because while I do personally I would love to see that, because I love both of those. I love both of those characters, and I would love to see them fight in an official capacity. Except, I've been thinking about it, and I just kind of think that Gamera and Godzilla work better in their own respective universes, because Gamera kind of has to operate on this very particular set of rules that I feel are sometimes somewhat incompatible with Godzilla, because in the Godzilla universe, monsters are these more or less amoral, survival-based creatures that are basically, humanity just kind of gets caught up in the scuffle, and we just have to weather the storm and wait for them to pass, or alternatively find a way to stem the tide. Whereas with Gamera, the whole idea is that Gamera has this connection to humanity, this direct connection to humanity, and something about that, a monster like that, like Gamera, being somewhat incompatible, it feels somewhat incompatible with the Godzilla universe, which is, the Gamera universe is monsters on the opposite ends of the morality spectrum, trying to change the world for their own purposes. The Gauss are trying to swarm the planet and eat everyone. The Legion are trying to reproduce from planet to planet. Guron is a monster being controlled by evil space babes. What have you? And then you have Gamera, whose whole thing is protecting humanity, but there's also, I feel like there's so much potential and so much happening in the Gamera universe that to shove it into the Godzilla universe would be doing it a disservice. So that's my personal feelings. I mean, I'd like to just see them fight, and we did see them fight in Death Battle, which was cool because they used some of my artwork in the end of the video, but beyond that, yeah, I don't necessarily need them to fight in a movie.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it, exactly. I think they would work better in a cooperative type setting more than just a straight up King Kong vs. Godzilla style death match.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if I would want them to team up. I just don't even want them near each other. But I still like them, and I will probably one day get around to actually drawing Gamera vs. Godzilla. But But yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, now we're going to start with some round of questions from people outside of my main group. This first one is from Kayshawn Johnson, the moderator from Godzilla Universe. He wants to know, what is your favorite monster to draw other than Godzilla?
Ooh, that's a toughie, because I get this one sometimes, and I never have a good answer for it. I have to say, Anguirus guys like Anguirus and Baragon and these four-legged monsters are really fun. Oh man, he's a bit of a pain, but Destroyer, or Destoroya, or however you want to say his name, there's a lot going on with that character design, so as a result it's a bit of a pain to get all the little details, but it's also, if you can find, it's fun finding ways to make it work on page, and that was one of the reasons why we went with Destroyer for Godzilla Legends, because it's such a kind of an awkward, overstuffed design, but which made me want to drive myself even harder to make it a little more elegant and a little more predatory in the Godzilla in my illustrations. So yeah, so probably Destroyer is probably one of those, but it also changes I really love the 60s Rodan. I love drawing that version of Rodan a lot because he's kind of got these big goofy eyes and this dumb snout.
Yeah.
Hang on, I gotta look at my shelf again. Let me see. Hedorah. Hedorah is a lot of fun because, again, there's a particular shape and elegance to the way Hedorah's design works, and I like trying to get that just right. So, it just depends. But yeah, that's one of them.
I mean, Hedorah, he's kind of I think he might be a trick one to draw for some people because he's basically a big giant walking pile of goop when you really think about it.
You're not wrong, but there is a logic to how he's designed. There is actually there is a structure to the body because you're basing it off of the suit, and the suit has these distended arms. It has these very squat legs. it's almost all head. Like its head it takes up most of its body. So there's a lot of different ways to approach it, but that's the way I like to do it personally.
Okay, that's a pretty.
So hopefully that answers the question.
I think that was a pretty good answer.
There you go. Excellent. I like
and
that.
then we had another member from Godzilla Universe, Aaron Kroll, had this he wanted to ask. He wants to know what are your thoughts about the new Kaiju movies that Legendary is doing, and he also asked about what other Godzilla comics that you might have planned.
Okay, I heard a bit about the Godzilla comics. What was the first part? I'm sorry?
You want to know what your overall thoughts were about the new MonsterVerse movies that Legendary is doing.
Oh, okay, right on. And then, so it's like a two-parter, and then the comics. Okay, so I'm really excited about where it's going to go. I thought that Gareth Edwards' Godzilla was an admirable effort. I have some issues with the movie, but I think it was very ambitious, and I respect it for that. I respect it for its ambition in not being overindulgent, and for trying something a little new. I don't think it was necessarily 100% successful, but I did really like it. And then Kong is like, it's just so much fun because it's showing how you can go in the complete opposite direction with it, and how you can just go for something that's like a Doug McClure, A Land That Time Forgot, Monster Island adventure film that's violent and stupid, but it also kind of knows that it's stupid. Everybody can still hear me, right? I feel like I'm having some audio issues.
You're coming in good.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, good. And it just was, it's just this over-the-top, ridiculous, stupid movie that it's also kind of aware that it's kind of being stupid, but it doesn't care. So that makes it more admirable to me. But then, so it makes me really interested in where they're going to go forward with the MonsterVerse and like what they're going to do next, because thus far they've been pretty clever in how they've worked the monsters into this universe. So I'm really interested in what is going to be next for that. As for the second part with regards to what Godzilla comics are coming out, I actually can't speak to that because I don't really know exactly what's going on with IDW right now as far as the Godzilla comics are concerned. I've been asking about it, and I'm getting a lot of static. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they're changing their strategy regarding the franchise, or if the rights lapsed and they haven't renewed them, or if Legendary and Warner Brothers are starting up a stink. It's hard to know what's gonna happen. In the meantime, though, we are releasing the Godzilla comics in Japan, and I've been kind of working on those, doing supplemental material and doing new covers for those and stuff, because my publisher over there at Phase 6 is very ambitious, and he's very excited to do like convention exclusive covers, and he just really, because he's got all these other licenses too that he's been recently acquiring, and Godzilla was the first big license he got, so he's been really excited about that, and I've been excited for that because that means I get to go to Japan more. So yeah, that's all that's really going on the Godzilla comics front. I mean, if you want to know what's going on, I would say find a way to contact IDW directly, or and demand that they that they make more Godzilla comics, and that they also get Matt Frank back on them.
Yeah, I would definitely be doing that if I just knew how. Okay, anyway, I'll be getting out of my very first question here.
Okay.
All right. Outside of the comics you worked on for IDW, what were your favorite issues, characters, kaiju, and storylines from the Marvel and Dark Horse runs on Godzilla?
Oh man, so many memories. The Marvel and Dark Horse books were really definitely some of the first comics I ever like collected the whole runs for, and like the Dark Horse comics were definitely a big influence for me. as far as they go, some of my favorite stories for them, that specific artwork is really what I'm thinking of, like the cover where Godzilla, I don't remember which issue it is, I think it's issue 7, Godzilla has these giant arrows in his chest and body, and he's on his knees, but he's also simultaneously getting up and trying to yank the arrows out. That's just such a dramatic image for me, and I love it so much. In addition, that story arc was really interesting about these alien bounty hunters that have come to Earth trying to capture or kill Godzilla. And then on top of that, you just have like that story arc there is probably the highlight of it for me. I liked all the other stuff. I liked the time travel one. I liked Bagora coming to Earth to hunt Godzilla, although a lot of that is also kind of stuff that's been played with before. But for some reason, the alien hunters, the giant alien hunters, was a really interesting story arc for them to go with. So that's cool. I like that one a lot. As for the Marvel stuff, the Marvel Godzilla, I think, had a little more leeway to get kind of crazy with it and do like a lot of different stuff, especially when it started playing with the Marvel universe. I really like the story arc of Godzilla being in the West and being out in cattle country, because I like that there's no pretense about the fact that this is the 1970s and there's still wide swaths of the American West that don't actually know what's going on in the major metropolitan areas, so a giant monster could just wander into the American Southwest and like just disappear, and then a bunch of cowboys wind up fighting him. I also just really like the narration. The writing in the Marvel books, I think, is really it's overly dramatic and a little flowery, but that's kind of what I like about it. So, yeah, I love that stuff. I love it a lot.
I mean, the Marvel stuff very much captures the tone and spirit of the Showa era of Godzilla, if you ask me personally. The Dark Horse stuff is the Heisei stuff. The Marvel stuff, it's for the Showa fans. So it's got different flavors depending on which era of Godzilla that you like better.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's definitely one way to put it. Personally, I like to think that they kind of have their own vibe to them, where they don't. Yeah, the Dark Horse stuff does have a very Heisei vibe to it, but the Showa stuff, the Marvel stuff, I feel like even has a flavor to it unique from the Showa series because it's this American comic series from the 70s, and I don't know, something about it is it's just. It reminds me a little bit of Skull Island in this very indulgent way, which is ironic considering they both take place in the 70s.
Yeah, my follow-up to this question was, and were there things that you wanted to have seen changed or done differently in the Marvel Dark Horse comics that you could have done so?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I probably would have milked the Marvel Universe stuff for a little more, like you could... There's lots of Marvel stuff they only barely touched on that they could have really run with, but for the most part they did a pretty good job. There's not a whole lot I think I'd actually change. The Dark Horse stuff I would have had more straight up monster fights, because a lot of it really is just Godzilla breaking stuff, and it's just Godzilla kind of just rampaging and breaking stuff, and he doesn't really get to fight very many monsters claw to claw, but I mean sometimes they turn that on its head and do something interesting with it, like with the alien bounty hunters, the Diani or whatever they're called. I think that's how they call them.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And so they kind of turn it on its head and they try something different, which I appreciated, but. It just would have been nice to see him fight more just straight up monsters. But, I wasn't the writer, so it's not my call. But yeah.
I would have liked if Dark Horse would have eventually gotten the rights to use other Toho Kaiju. I would have liked to have seen how they would have been rendered on the pages of those comics, personally.
Yeah, that does remind me of something that I would have changed, because, the fact is that at the time, it was really hard to get the rights to monsters other than Godzilla from Toho, I think they just charge too much for them or something. I'm honestly not sure what the history is there. I need to track down one of those editors and find out. But the big one, oh, what was it? There's a big one that stuck out to me. Oh, they had created their own original like Mothra, Rodan, and King Ghidorah for the Dark Horse comics that were drafted up by Steve Bissette, who's another big inspiration for me. And he came up with Sauron, Inagos, and I don't remember the name of the King Ghidorah creature, but I know that one I think was rejected because it was a little too close to King Ghidorah. But the Mothra, but Sauron and Inagos kind of had their own unique flair to them, even though they really were just kind of pastiches of Rodan and Mothra. On the one hand, I'm sort of glad they didn't go with them. They did have an Anguirus Gamera kind of hybrid, like this spiked turtle monster. I can't remember what that one was called, but yeah, you know. I don't know. Hindsight's 20/20, but I like what they did regardless.
You can't change. We don't have time machines to change things.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, here's my next question here. This one should really be interesting. This one's about unmade Godzilla films. And the question is, of all the unmade Toho Godzilla films, which ones would you have wanted to see made, and which ones were you kind of glad didn't get made? And then the next part of this is, what were your thoughts on the unmade Nessie movie collaboration between Toho and Hammer Studios from the 70s?
Oh, interesting questions. Personally, as far as Toho Godzilla movies that weren't made, I mean, the big one for me is actually, it wasn't a Toho joint, it was the TriStar Godzilla versus the Griffin movie from the 90s. I think that one would have been freaking fantastic had they made it, because I've read the script repeatedly, and I just thought it was so much fun, and just kind of, again, it was this indulgent giant monster movie that had a lot of really cool stuff happening, and it's just a shame that never got made.
Same here.
Another one that I wish had gotten made was Godzilla Reborn, which was supposed to be a Toho-Sony collaboration that was going to be shot in Hawaii. That is, it was supposed to be created. It was supposed to be written and I think partially not directed, but it was definitely supposed to be written in part by Mike Schlesinger, who was the adaptation director for the American version of Godzilla 2000, and he wanted to make this somewhat tongue-in-cheek but still very fun Godzilla movie with like an American cast and but with Japanese effects. Like they would have farmed out the effects work to Toho and filmed it in Hawaii. Had a lot of Japanese and American co-stars and stuff. And I think that would have been really cool if they had done that, and they never did. They torpedoed that, unfortunately. So on top of that, one movie that I also the third one, and I'm going to stop talking about this. The third one that I wished I had gotten made was the Mothra revival movie from the 90s, because it was supposed to be that was the one with Mothra versus Bagan. And then there's been a lot of hue and cry over the years for when is Toho going to put Bagan in something? When is Bagan going to be in something? And for those who don't know, Bagan is is a monster best known from the 1993, I want to say, Super Godzilla game for the Super NES. And he got really built up as being this ultimate enemy for Godzilla because he's supposed to be made from Godzilla and King Ghidorah's DNA, spliced with this dragon monster from China, and that sort of got it got a little. It's gotten a little overblown over the years because they've basically taken the raw concept for Bagan and split it up over a bunch of different monsters, and so as a result, it's made Bagan a little redundant now. But something about the idea of Mothra having this enemy to fight and it not being strictly a kids movie the way that the 90s Mothra films were, sounds really interesting to me, and I think that would have been fun. But I could talk all day about the Godzilla films I wish they had made. I wish they made Godzilla versus Batman, which they wanted to do at one point and it never got made. So that sucks. But yeah, that's my answer.
And the second part was about the unmade Toho Hammer collaboration Nessie movie.
The Nessie one? Yeah, thank you for reminding me. I almost forgot about that. I did forget about that. I think that would have been really neat. I don't know a whole lot about it. I've heard of it, and I've read a little bit about it. And they made the Nessie prop, didn't they? Because if anybody has photos of that, it would be you, Greg.
I don't know if they made a full-on prop or not, but I did hear that in another Toho film that they had a creature that was like a dragon of some sort that was said to have been the Nessie prop for this film.
Yeah, that's a shame that they never did that. They never got around to doing that. Because that would have been really cool. Doing a big budget. It feels like the whole Japanese-American co-production thing never really quite met its potential, because you've got stuff like King Kong Escapes, which is definitely the biggest example of a Japanese-American co-production next to The Last Dinosaur, both of which are perfectly entertaining and fun movies, but it feels like there in the 70s there was a sweet spot they could have hit where they could have had you could have had Japanese effects work, but with an American budget, which meant that it could have been really, they could have made some really impressive stuff, and it just never came to fruition. So it's a bit of a shame. I wish that had gone through.
Yeah, this would have been a Toho's answer to the American Jaws film if it had gotten made.
Yeah, it feels like I was gonna say I feel like the closest thing is Legend of the Dinosaurs from Toei, which is a weird, meandering film with not a whole lot of monster action that's desperately trying to be Jaws. So we won't hold that against it, though. Everybody was trying to be Jaws in the 70s.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Chris?
I would actually probably ask, in terms of like a paleo perspective, but I'll try to get to like the Godzilla stuff first. Is that what are your thoughts on the debate on what type of dinosaurs Godzilla is actually made of? Because Ken Carpenter, a paleontologist, has made a published paper about it, and he says that it was actually that it was 3 dinosaurs that were combined in Godzilla. It was Tyrannosaurus Rex, Iguanodon, and Stegosaurus. What are your thoughts on that?
So are we talking specifically design influences?
Yes.
Because I think that's absolutely true. If you look at the structure of of the original Godzilla maquette, if you look at that structure, it's very much an iguanodon body type, but it's also very clearly inspired by various dinosaur illustrations from that time period, from the 50s, which are by now, by modern standards, outdated. I mean, even the relatively forward-thinking work by Charles R. Knight is still, of course, somewhat outdated. But I would say that they just wanted something that kind of had that general shape to it. And the arms, I think, more than anything, are definitely designed to look like iguanodon arms because it has those very pronounced thumbs, which is, of course, why Shin Godzilla looks the way it does, because they took that original maquette that had these positively tiny arms, and they just pushed that to its extreme. I think that's pretty accurate. I do hear a lot of debate, and I hear a lot of arguments about what kind of dinosaur Godzilla is in the logic of the series. And one of the things I actually like is that in the more recent stuff, they've more or less abandoned the idea of Godzilla being an actual dinosaur. Like they've more or less said, we're not going to bother trying to tie him to a specific species. It's more interesting for him to be this hitherto unknown super species that has this natural affinity towards radioactivity. So, yeah, that's my response to that. I think from a design perspective, that's fairly accurate. I think they took what they wanted from various dinosaurs and just kind of mashed them all together.
Yeah, because I thought that Ken Carpenter actually put it right on the money in terms of like what types of dinosaurs were actually possibly influenced in terms of the Godzilla, and because I could see like the spikes are kind of like what Stegosaurus's plates were, and then just put it on the back of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they actually had the arms of Iguanodon on there, and so it makes a lot of sense to me, and I would say the skull of Godzilla is more likely designed of like a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yeah, it's what's actually very interesting, and this is something that I'm surprised to find out that not a whole lot of people know. If you look at the original Godzilla maquette and you compare it down the line, and you also look at, there's some original concept sketches as well that are out there. They are available to find online. If you look at these designs, Godzilla's head is actually supposed to be modeled after a mushroom cloud. He has these bulbousy formations. It's especially apparent on Shin Godzilla. He has these bulbousy formations around his snout and mouth and head and face. It's supposed to look like the billowing form of a mushroom cloud. And over the years, that design has been changed and altered and kicked back and forth and changed ever so slightly. You know, in the Heisei era, it had more of a mammalian look to it. In the Millennium era, they gave it more of a crocodilian quality, especially in the legendary Godzilla, which is where they gave it a mix of like a bear and a crocodile. But then with Shin Godzilla, it comes back full circle, and they really made the face look like a mushroom cloud. So yeah, I think that, and of course that also lines up with the keloid scarring that's supposed to be on Godzilla's skin, which is the scar tissue that happens after a radiation burn. So yeah, it's an interesting topic to discuss.
Yeah, I'd like to actually add one more question in here. Is that what in terms of a dinosaur movie, what kind of dinosaur movies were you actually kind of have a soft spot for? Like, what are your, like, give me like your top 3 favorites.
Oh boy. Okay. Well, my number one is definitely going to be Jurassic Park. That movie changed my DNA as a kid. Like, it rewrote something about my DNA as a child. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about Jurassic Park, about the merits of the film. I won't go too much into that. I mentioned it before, but 1 million years BC was really inspirational for me because it was really like Harryhausen had reached into Charles R. Knight's illustrations and put them on screen. That's a really big one for me. And what's another one? That third spot is kind of hard to fill with any one particular film. So stuff like The Last Dinosaur, the original King Kong. You know, I'm trying to think of what other dinosaurs movies that something specific. It's hard to say because for a long time dinosaur movies I mean, let's be honest, they're a little schlocky. They're kind of schlock because they're ready-made monsters. They're really easy kind of go-to monsters, but at the same time, you would still love them, and there's a lot of craft and artistry that went into them over the years. Yeah, Jurassic Park, 1 million years BC. Geez, man. Yeah, I don't have a third because I keep filling it with something different every couple of seconds. So, yeah, those are definitely my top two, though, like, of all time. Now I want to go downstairs and look at my DVD collection and be like, all right, what other dinosaur movies do I have that aren't Harryhausen? And the numbers quickly dwindle. There was it's not a movie, but there was a goofy-ass dinosaur. Sorry, I said another swear. There was a goofy dinosaur TV show from Japan called Born Free. No, well, there were three. There was Born Free, Dinosaur Task Force Koseiden, and Dinosaur Task Force Eisenborg, which was adapted as Attack of the Super Monsters. It was about a bunch of sentient dinosaurs that tried to take over an anime version of Japan in all their puppety glory. So, yeah, I as much as I love really accurate dinosaurs and accurate depictions of dinosaurs, there is an indelible, an undeniable charm to some of the schlockier, schmaltzier stuff from the 60s and 70s that I just love those big doofy dinosaurs from that era. They're so much fun. So yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, because Jurassic Park will always be my number one.
Sure.
Because my other two, I would actually say Valley of Gwangi.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, because I think that one actually has it has that King Kong type of plot, and I would say the silent film, the very first Lost World, the 1925 version, and I have that DVD. It's kind of amazing of how that story actually went down, and I think it's more depicted on towards the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book a lot more than say like the later films, like say like the 1960 version, which is pretty much a dumb movie considering that it's all like lizards that are made to be dinosaurs.
Yeah,
and I mean I do, and also have like I have sort of a soft spot for The Last Dinosaur because I mean I watched that as a kid.
Richard Boone, baby.
Yeah, and I think if I look at that film, I would actually say it has more of like I would actually say it's kind of got like that humorous type of vibe, where it's kind of like making fun of the past a little bit more.
Yeah, it's very much kind of lampooning the exploration era of King Kong and stuff.
Because I would actually say the other one I would actually say is I usually don't want to put animated films into my list, but I actually kind of the Land Before Time series is okay. I mean, I actually kind of liked the one dinosaur movie that is animated that I really loved as a kid was We're Back. I thought that was hilarious.
So good. That movie is. I haven't watched it in a while, but I remember last time I watched it, I realized that I still get choked up at that ending, at that final resolution. That still chokes me up a little bit. I would say that disregarding the sequels, the original Land Before Time is actually a pretty powerful and well done movie. It's very effective, extremely well animated, and just really, that movie had a pretty profound effect on me as a kid as well. It's interesting you should bring up Gwangi because I recently rewatched that, and it's a fun movie and it's really well done, but it's also like, man, I hate that protagonist. He's this guy who like he's such a jerk, but it's supposed to be framed as though he's a lovable jerk because sure he treats his girlfriend like craps, but he saved that kid that one time. I don't know. It just that guy's a prick, but. The rest of the movie's pretty good, and it's got a lot of it's got a lot of good points to it. And, you know, it's Harryhausen. It's not all bad, but I always loved the Eohippus in the movie. I always thought that was a great little effect. I actually pitched a Valley of Gwangi prequel comic back when I was working with Blue Water to try to do a tie-in for those books, and I had this whole concept worked up for Valley of Gwangi prequel, and I wrote this story out about how because the gypsies knew about Gwangi, and they knew about the Valley of whatever they called it.
In Valley.
The Valley of, and but no, it had like a name to it. It was like a Valley of the Devil or something.
In the movie, they call it the Forbidden Valley.
The Forbidden Valley, yeah. And I had this whole idea worked up about how do they know about it, and like how do they know about Gwangi, and where did the old woman come from, and how, you know, and I sort of had this dumb idea, and it was really, the whole thing was just an excuse for me to have Gwangi fight a Therizinosaurus, because those dinosaurs are just so interesting. So, yeah, it's a shame it didn't ultimately work out, because they wound up not having the rights to that. That was with it's with Paramount or Warner Brothers or somebody. But yeah, I dig it.
Yeah, it's kind of pretty cool that you actually kind of have a story about a prequel of Gwangi. I thought that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's like I said, unfortunately, it just didn't work out. But it would have been neat, and like I said, maybe get some kind of robust characters in there and make a nice one shot, you know. But anyway, so yeah, works. Okay.
I have a few other questions I would like to ask. Well, one of them is actually one that I just thought up. It's related to what Chris was just talking about. Have you ever seen When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth, and what are your views on it?
When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth. Oh, that's the old Hammer production.
Yeah, the one that Jim Danforth animated.
What's that?
It was the one that Jim Danforth animated.
Yeah, that's right. It wasn't a Harryhausen joint. It was Jim Danforth. 1 second. When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth was, you know, I think as a kid, I sort of wrote it off, because I was like, well, this is just 1 million years BC, but with less dinosaurs. But I still, when I finally saw it, I wound up really enjoying it, because it's you know, of course it's a Hammer joint, so it's really erotic, and I liked it for that. I liked that it was so, it was a little more brazen about it, a little less kid-friendly, but, you know, I'm good with that. And then the dinosaurs are great. Like, Jim Danforth has a very unique stop motion quality to him, where I think he goes for a less is more approach, where he has only a handful of dinosaurs, a handful of creatures, but he really animates the hell out of them. And I also really really liking it, the fact that the main character formed this relationship with this big mama dinosaur, whatever that was supposed to be. It was like this Radosaurus or something. So yeah, I really like that movie. I'm an easy lay for dinosaur movies, so.
And
except for that Walking with Dinosaurs movie from a few years ago. Oh boy, that was hard to watch.
I skipped that one.
Yeah.
You want to hear an interesting fact about When Dinosaurs Ruled the Earth? Something that Greg and I learned.
Tell me.
Well, the dinosaur in that one, the one that looks like the Radosaurus, the mama dinosaur, everybody calls it.
Uh-huh.
Well, originally that was actually supposed to be a Tyrannosaurus Rex, but the producer of the film had forbidden Jim Danforth from putting a T-Rex in this film, because he thought that it walked too much like a stereotypical gay man.
Really?
I'm dead serious.
That is so weird. I did not know that. Wow, that's so stupid. I mean, I mean, you really, when you think about it, there's not a whole lot of T-Rexes in classic dinosaur films. The only ones that immediately come to mind are the really goofy one from Caveman with Ringo Starr, and then what was the other one? Don't tell me. Oh, Planet of the Dinosaurs. And Planet of the Dinosaurs is just freaking terrible. Like, it is. I've even tried watching it with the rip tracks, and it is almost unwatchable, even with the rip tracks. Oh boy, I mean, they really set it well during the rip tracks when the first dinosaur shows up, and they all start clapping. And, oh, it's like a stop motion gift from God. So yeah.
Planet of Dinosaurs has always been a guilty pleasure movie of mine. I know the acting and writing suck, but you watch it for the good quality of stop motion effects for the dinosaurs and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, even then, like, it's just. But I guess, like, I want to give it the benefit of the doubt with, like, trying to just be indulgent with the dinosaur stuff, but it's just so boring. But, you know, it takes, maybe other people are, have a higher tolerance for that stuff than I do. But yeah, so I know we've got a fair more amount of questions to go through.
Yeah, I was getting ready to bring I was going to jump ahead to my question about Godzilla versus the Griffin.
Okay, sure. Let's pick a couple of highlights and let's go ahead and get through them, because as much as I know that I could sit here and talk for another 3 hours, I don't know how long your podcasts usually run.
We can go as long as we need to.
Alright, well, it's just that we're going to go see Kong here in a little bit, and I'm going to need to drive across town to do that, and so I've got to be scooting along here in a little bit. But let's go ahead and rock out a couple more questions.
I had two more questions, but I can fit them together into one question if that'll work.
Sure, go ahead, even though it's probably just going to be a two-part question.
What do you hope to see in future Godzilla films, and what monsters from previous Godzilla films would you like to see in future ones?
Well, to be perfectly honest, when it comes to the legendary stuff, I mean, I'm just thinking, stay the course, you know, make fun movies, give the audiences what they want, because that's clearly what will make money. Don't make bad movies, obviously, but, like, you know, make them fun and fill them with monsters. And, you know, I think Skull Island is kind of the direction to go in. I don't want them to all be exactly like that, but I do want more, like, more like, just you know, just have a little more fun with it, because I think the Gareth Edwards thing was an interesting approach, but I also think it was, it's not super viable for moving forward. So I think that with Kong, I think they saw what audiences really wanted, so I think that's kind of a given. As far as the Japanese side of things go, I just want them to keep doing weird stuff, because, to be perfectly honest, the genre kind of stagnated for a while. Like, that's the reason why Godzilla went away, is because the genre stagnated, and it got to the point where nobody cared anymore. Gamera the Brave was the last big Japanese studio kaiju production, and it really kind of tanked. It was a huge loss. It greatly underperformed because there was no market for kaiju movies. And that's not something that I want to happen again. I don't want the genre to stagnate for... if the genre is going to go back to hibernation anytime soon, I want it to not be because of audience burnout. So I'm just hoping that we'll get more weird, interesting stuff, because the Godzilla animated film is looking... I think it's going to be really interesting to see where that goes. I'm really interested in that. And as for new monsters, as for classic monsters, again, I'm kind of hoping they stick with doing more new monsters. But at the same time, it would be nice to see a cameo from Titanosaurus or or hell, let's bring back Hedorah. I think a new movie with Hedorah would be really interesting, especially with modern technology. As much as I love the kind of doofy rubber-suited Hedorah, and as much as I love Ken Satsuma in that suit, I really do want to see what they could do with a proper modern Hedorah, especially since he kind of got the shaft in Final Wars and wasn't really utilized.
I would love to see Anguirus and Biollante in a future Godzilla film. I love those two.
Yeah, they're great monsters. Personally, I don't know if I want to see Biollante again because Godzilla vs. Biollante is such a... They use it nearly perfectly. I really hold the original. I really hold Godzilla vs. Biollante in really high regard. So to use her again is something that I have a lot of trepidation about if they wound up doing that. But yeah, it'd be nice if Anguirus came back. Some of the staples that have a lot of potential to them. But yeah, that's my response to that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sure. Here comes one of my questions I've been wanting to ask for some time. It's about Godzilla versus the Griffin. It's got several different parts to it. The first half is how good do you think the Godzilla vs. Griffin film by John DeBont would have turned out if it got made to the 1990 film of Devil and Emmerich? And following up, what impact would this have had on the rest of the franchise going forward, assuming that it both got made and was successful?
Well, it's hard to say because things are the way they are, and you can't really go back and change stuff, no matter what the doctor tells you. But at the same time, I do wish, there's a part of me that had wished it had been made, and I think that probably what would have happened is Toho probably would have still taken a break from the films for a while. But this one, I definitely just think it would have been more successful. I think that people would have, I think the genre maybe would have had a different path, and maybe we would still be watching a concurrent Japanese and Godzilla, Japanese and American Godzilla series. Maybe it would have, they would have fast-tracked that to happen in the late 90s as opposed to now. But at the same time, I don't think 90s America was the proper venue for a faithful Godzilla film, because then it feels like people would have just been saying, well, the Japanese clearly never knew, because the thing that created Godzilla 98 was an attitude of the Japanese, this attitude of, well, the Japanese just never knew how to do it, and we know how to do it because we're Americans. And I worry that would have become the prevailing attitude of the time. But it almost was a kind of a blessing in disguise that they tanked so hard. I mean, the movie didn't fail, but it was met with such aggressive. Blowback that it's like, what do you do? So I definitely think things would have been different. I think it would have been a very. I think that maybe ultimately it would have been better for the genre, but I just don't think that. But it's obviously that's not the way things turned out, and I don't even know if audiences would have really even gone for it, because a kaiju movie like that has such a specific vibe to it. I also think there probably would have been a lot of comparisons to Gamera, Guardian of the Universe at the time, which, considering how similar the monsters are in each film, I think I don't know if I really would have wanted that to happen. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. But that's my wishy-washy, non-committal answer.
Okay, and this is regarding the actual script itself. I mean, what were your favorite scenes from it, and what are your thoughts on it overall? Would you have changed anything from it to make it either better, or do you think it would have been good enough to actually put into film? And then the last part, would the Don McPherson rewrite have been a viable script to put on film from your point of view if they had to axe the Elliot Rossio screenplay?
Oh boy. I think that I think the only version I read was the rewrite version, because the rewrite version is the one where he tears off the Griffin's head and spikes it on the Statue of Liberty, right?
Yeah, that was in the Don McPherson rewrite. I think the original one he spikes it on the on one of the supports of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, I think it was the rewrite that I read. I don't know. Like, there's a lot of really good. It's a film. It's just a script that has a lot of really cool stuff in it. It has good stuff just in it, and it's very just a very robust. It's just robust, and it's just got a lot of different. See, I like films that have a lot of just stuff in them, and yet the stuff all kind of holds together well. And I feel that way about the script. I mean, it's not an ideal script. It's a little meandery with some of its character stuff, but I do like the characters. I like that the main character is a draconologist. It sort of anticipates the 2014 Godzilla movie and the MonsterVerse in that respect, in that it's about people who are trying to find that there actually is truth to the legends of monsters that used to roam the world, and Godzilla is one of those monsters. I think that's a really interesting idea. In the script, I really like the Golden Gate Bridge sequence. I think that's really inspired. I think that the stuff with, like, the frogs raining down from the sky and the church and in the small town is really interesting. I think my favorite element of it is the fact that the human characters are still involved in what's happening in the finale, because that's a trap a lot of Godzilla movies fall into, where they're just like, well, I guess we have to just let the humans stand on a rooftop and gawk at the monsters for the next 10 minutes while they fight. And because I remember during Christmas, we had a big Christmas family get-together at my in-laws this year, and at one point, I don't even remember what was on television. I knew I just got fed up with it, and I decided, okay, if I'm going to survive this, I'm going to need to put on El Rey Network and put on their Kaiju Marathon. And I remember everybody kind of started watching it a little bit, and some of my cousins, not my cousins, but my wife's cousins were kind of sat down to watch it with me, because they hadn't seen a Godzilla movie since they were kids, and so we were all kind of watching it, and they were like, oh man, like, I had no idea that, like, there was, like, a bad Mothra, like a evil spiky Mothra, because Godzilla vs. Mothra was on, and I remember my father-in-law saying, wow, they're still fighting? Because they fought for like 10 minutes, and the humans do nothing. And that really kind of bothers me, so that's why I like it when the human characters are given something to do during the finale, especially if it means helping the monsters, or fighting the monsters themselves. So, yeah, it's a good one. I like those elements of it. I hope that answered your question. I kind of got off the rails there a little bit.
That was quite satisfying. We share a lot of the same thoughts regarding that screenplay. I think this script had better human characters than the 2014 film, personally.
Hey. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think the 2014 film has a lot of issues in that respect, and that makes me a little sad, but, it made money, and that's what's important.
I mean, in this story, you actually felt like the characters had backstory and genuine reasons for why they did things, with the protagonist, Jill, having a reason to want to kill Godzilla, for example.
Well, yeah, it just... And here's the thing. You can have all the motivation in the world. You can be hewing and hawing and crying about your boring family and your boring kid and your boring wife. But if you don't like the characters, then it's all kind of moot. Or if you at least don't find them engaging on some level. Movies like Trainspotting, which are about horrible people, but they're also about very... But they're also very compelling characters. It's like or Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs was about these just horrible people. They're criminals and they're murderers, but you're interested and compelled by them because they're written well and they have good and they're even if the motivation is kind of hard to connect with, you still like them, and you want to. And a movie that had that in spades, of course, was Colossal. But I've gushed over Colossal the last like 3 days straight, so I don't need to gush about it anymore. But yeah.
Yeah. My favorite part of that script was the actual overall battle between Godzilla and the Griffin, just based on where they fought throughout New York City, especially that fatality move. I mean, that's got to be, for me, the most brutal way Godzilla's killed another kaiju, hands down.
Oh yeah. They did good work. They did good work. It is a shame it never got made, but that's not the world we live in. We live in the dark timeline. So.
Well, if there is a silver lining, is that Terry Rossio just got handpicked to head the writers' room for Godzilla vs. Kong going forward. So I personally see that as like a second chance for a guy that got screwed over by Sony back in the day.
It's going to be very interesting to see what his contributions are going to be. I'm just very interested in. I saw an article today that was a little snooty. It said, but the title was actually very funny. It said, "Godzilla vs. Kong, a movie about two monsters fighting, somehow needs 7 writers." And I had to kind of cock my eyebrow because on the one hand, a lot of modern Hollywood films have lots of writers, and on the other hand, it's like sometimes you do run into the problem of having too many cooks in the kitchen. But at the same time, there's a lot of elements to have to work through and make sure that they all flow together. Then more power to it. I'm just hoping that it's not just 2 hours of Godzilla and Kong fighting. That it's like there's like other monsters in there as well. Maybe team up by the end of it. Yeah. Pretty much it in a nutshell. Let's unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut this off here in a minute. So let's do maybe 2 more questions.
All right.
And maybe we can do a follow-up interview down the line.
Okay, I think I could agree to that possibly. Like, consider it a part 2, perhaps?
Sure.
All right. I have one already here. I have one here picked before I agree on to it. This question is there a dream fight between 2 kaiju that you've always wanted to do but never gotten around to doing in terms of artwork?
Oh, that is an interesting question. Let me look at my shelf again. I'm trying to get a print done of the Mutos versus the Skullcrawlers, and it's just, but I'm just so busy with other stuff. It's sometimes hard to get things like that done if it's just kind of this self-indulgent thing. I drew Mechanic Kong versus Mechagodzilla once. That was fun.
Not that.
Yeah. I covered a lot of ground in Rulers of Earth. I mean, we had a lot of monsters who fought each other. Let me think for a second. At this point, it's like going out past the Godzilla mythos specifically. I mean, the Mothra trilogy had Mothra have all these weird different forms. That would be fun to kind of shove into a battle of some kind. That would be interesting. You know what I'd love to do is I'd love to do a comic version of Godzilla versus the Wolf of the legendary beast Wolfman versus Godzilla, which is sort of the lost Godzilla film that Shizuo Nakajima has been trying to finish for a while now. And but he made it with like a bunch of former Toho effects guys, and I think they made it in the 80s after the Godzilla cycle had ended. And I would love to do like a comic of that. Just because the Wolfman is such a fun character. It's such a humanoid monsters are always fun to draw because you get to be crazy with how they do stuff, because they can use tools and stuff. But beyond that, let's have 7 King Ghidorahs fight each other, because screw it, right? Actually, like doing a thing where like every incarnation of King Ghidorah invades one reality, and then having Godzilla having to fight them all. That would be cool. I would draw that. There's like, it's like you can do personal dream matches all day long, but ultimately it's like, ultimately it's more about kind of the story and like what's happening and why should I care, because you can have monsters fight all day. Monsters don't need much of a reason to fight each other. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, with rulers we kind of covered that. We covered so much ground with that. It's hard to say like what we could have done more. But yeah, let's go ahead and do one more.
All right, I figured I'd combine these two similar questions into one here. It's about monster designs and which monsters would work effective as kaiju. The first one is, when it comes to kaiju designs, what groups of animals are most often used by you for reference? And supplement to this is, additionally, which ones do you like to use the most, and what ones are your least favorite reference animals?
Okay, you're talking about individual animal species, like real life animals,
or individual species or groups of animals that you might utilize as references for kaiju designs.
Well, it's interesting because I'm actually working on a kaiju design right now that really heavily uses the rock iguana that's native to Central America and the Caribbean. I mean, reptiles are kind of reptiles are sort of like both the go-to and also. So reptiles are kind of the most obvious choice because Godzilla sort of kicked all that off, but just dinosaurs in general were sort of the original movie monsters. So, pulling from reptiles is both a common kind of well-worn ground and also the most fun because reptiles are just inhuman enough to be monstrous and to be alien, but they're also just common enough and just kind of endearing enough for us to love them. And so as a result, those kind of make for some of the best monster designs. But you can make a monster out of anything. You can make a monster out of a staple remover. I mean, there's an artist named Toll Narita who is a major illustrator for the Ultraman franchise back in the 60s. And he designed a ton of monsters. He's got a great book out. I highly recommend. He designed monsters like Pigmon and Red King and some of the Ultramen themselves. And he took a lot of inspiration from geodes and geological structures and like the structures of different rocks and crystals. And so monsters like Red King and Pigmon are actually heavily inspired by non-animal stuff found in nature. I once based a monster off of a bobbit worm, which is a horrifying nightmare. And I'm trying to think of a few others. As far as ones I don't really like using, that's hard to say because everything presents an interesting design direction. Everything presents an interesting source of inspiration. You know what? Mammals are just really hard to make into monsters because mammals are already kind of big, they're already very prevalent, and they're already very easy to relate to because we are mammals. And Kong, I think, is an exception because Kong is so he's that whole neither beast nor man thing. So he's human. He's very human-like, and very and as a result, he almost sits in this uncanny valley where he's very recognizably human in a way, but he's also very inhuman and very intimidating in that respect because we know how terrible we can be just as humans. Because I mean, humans suck. I mean, we are the worst. We're not as bad as ducks, though. Ducks are pretty awful. But you really can. I mean, I made a platypus monster a few weekends ago. I mean, you can kind of make a monster out of anything. So yeah. But yeah, no, hopefully that should answer your questions.
That answered the first one. This next one is, outside of dinosaurs and creatures from mythology, what groups of animals... I think this one, you probably pretty well answered it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Alright, it's outside of dinosaurs and mythological creatures, what groups of animals do you feel can be utilized as kaiju effectively as those aforementioned groups, dinosaurs, mythological, supernatural beings? So which ones don't work so well as monsters?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much like mammals kind of fall into that category because mammals don't have like spikes and weird crazy stuff coming off of them except for maybe elephants, but elephants are already gigantic, and if you just make a bigger elephant, it kind of becomes a little boring. You have to be really careful with how you design mammalian monsters because if you just start adding spikes to them, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because aside from tusks and maybe the occasional horn, mammals don't typically have like a bunch of crap coming off of them. Yeah, I'd say mammals often. I mean, you can do it. You can do it. I picked up a monster this past weekend. I picked up a Bandai figure of a monster from Ultraman Tiga named King Mole Rat. And it's this, and rats and vermin make for great monsters because they're inherently kind of disgusting and repulsive. And sometimes they don't really have hair. It's like a naked mole rat that has these spikes on it, and also some hair, and also these weird ears, and also these big incisors, and it's a nightmare, and I love it. You can do it, but it just makes it difficult. Yeah.
This is just my personal opinion, of course, but I think if done right, an animal like a hyena could actually make a pretty terrifying monster, because hyenas are pretty menacing looking to begin with.
Yeah, it's funny, for Kaiju Combat, we made a hyena monster, but I feel like we couldn't push it as far as I wanted to push it, because the design direction from the collaborator was for this bipedal creature that was more of a heroic character, which I thought was a little interesting casting a hyena as a heroic character, because if I had my druthers, a hyena would just be this walking disease bag, and with this long distended neck and these shorter limbs, and just with big pustule sores on its face, because it's just riddled with disease. And that's to say nothing of the sexual dimorphism in their species, because they're all weird. They have some weird stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you do you, but anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, if you got, I think it might be. All right, this is one here. It's about there's a question pertaining more to artist perspective. As an artist, do you have any tips for anyone that's looking to get into the business on a professional level? And do you have any useful pointers on what an artist should and shouldn't do?
Okay, breathe, Greg, breathe. This would be a good one to end on, because I'm looking at the clock here, and also my dog is giving me those big doe eyes, so I think it's time for a walk. I would have to say that the best advice I can give is to constantly be working at it. Somebody asked me over the weekend, and she meant, there's nothing wrong with asking this, but she asked me, when did I realize that I had talent? I got an uncomfortable truth for you kids. Talent doesn't exist. Talent is a fabrication created to fool yourself into thinking that you can't do this. Because I think that nearly just about anybody can draw or play guitar or whatever. I mean, there are obviously exceptions. Some people do have a predilection towards something. But, like, all this stuff that I'm doing, all this illustration and stuff, this is all self-taught. I went to school at the University of Texas, but I didn't take any illustration courses. I went into the fine arts program because they had just closed down their illustration course before I went there back in 2004. And of course, they neglected to tell me that when the recruiters were talking to me, because they don't want to teach you anything; they want your money. Sorry, I don't want to get overly bitter about that, because a lot of people have really good college experiences. Jeff Zorno, who's a friend of mine and another really great artist, he went to the Joe Kubert School up in New York, and I actually am somewhat envious of him because he's learned a lot of techniques that I'm still learning, because, again, I'm all self-taught. If you can find yourself a sensei or a mentor or a school that has a really solid education department, illustration education department, really stick with that, and and really vet a place before going to it and before really committing to it. And aside from that, just keep drawing. Just keep drawing every day. Draw different things. Learn from artists who came before you, but don't emulate them. Don't try to be them. Try to be your own person, but don't be afraid to learn from them. beyond that, yeah, just make sure you're having fun with it. Make sure it's not something that starts to become a drain on you. You know, because some people would prefer just to draw for fun, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, that's the best advice I can give at the moment.
And I think that's some pretty good advice, personally.
Thank you, sir.
And okay, if we're ready to wrap things up here, I'd just like to say thank you for coming on to the program today, Matt.
Yeah, I was happy to do it, and I'm, we'll see if we can't squeeze in another episode at some point. Sorry if I have to cut this a little short. I've just got a lot to do today, and but I was happy to do it. It was fun talking to you guys, and I hope that I'm looking forward to seeing you guys at G-Fest.
Well, count on it.
All right.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, boys and girls, this is Prehistory: A Traveler's Guide. I am your host, Greg.